Hello, and welcome to another video. This video I'm going to be going over gear and basically what I recommend. There's going to be critical DR for each of the individual specs in the bottom left. Do take this with a grain of salt because this is a PvE's recommendation. From personal testing on some of these specs, it seems mostly right and it feels pretty good for the most part. We don't have much option in building our gear, but we do have more option than PvE's, so do keep that in mind. You can build how you want, but this is how I build my characters. At the top left, you'll see the tacticals that I own and often use, usually in the order that I have them listed. Same thing for implants, usually use them in that order. So for example, Advanced Pyrotech, we use Power Detonator probably the most, but Energized Event Brace is also fun, and then Overwhelming Offense is also solid. Implants, I use Stimulate and Shock Trooper. Sometimes I use Second Wind, and I very rarely use Mandalorian Armors, but they are meta. And for Pyro, I use Read Fuel, Explosive Weaponry sometimes, and Flame Dissipation sometimes if I'm basically never going to die and I'm trying to make use of the PvE parser kind of stuff. That's a completely confusing thing, but basically if you're using the dot roll shot and the increased damage, on your, I think every time you hit punch, increases your damage of your cylinder. So if you're able to maintain those max stacks, it's basically a single target kind of thing. But it's not bad for learning pyro. If you end up overheating a lot, this tactical will help you a lot. Then we have our critical DR, and obviously critical relic only if you're sub, which means below that number. If you're below that number, you can run the critical relic and it would actually be good. Then obviously our implants pretty much the same thing. And then for the min-max stats, to quickly explain that, I'll tell you whether I use accuracy or mastery stim. I'll tell you how many augments I use to reach those thresholds. And once I've basically reached those thresholds, I'll then put everything into either critical or mastery. I pretty much never change that. I always try to hit my accuracy and alacrity via usually the same combos. If not, I'll pretty much explain how I hit those, and then the dump stats are always critical and always mastery. And here in lethality, fire elements, Synox shots, I only use Synox when it's single target. You could sometimes use overwhelming if you're not able to use fire elements, but generally fire elements is the best one for you to use. And if you do want a single target, Synox shots is nice. There's also one that allows you to explode your dots, which is great if you can get resets, but if you can't get resets, it puts your white damage dot, I can't remember what it's called, on a longer cooldown, and unless that person dies, it doesn't reset. Again, if you do land the ability and the die, it will reset the dot, so that's pretty nice. And Concealment, I haven't played it too much, but Volatile Strike seems to be the only one that's really worth using. Critical DR is a little bit different here. It's one of the higher classes, along with Carnage. Here soon when we see Carnage, I do want to mention something. And also this class has a higher recommendation, so if you're below 3500 crit, you do want to have a critical relic because it would actually be beneficial. And moving on to Fury, we have Cauterized and Ridge Crush. One of them's a single target, and the other one's for AoE, so you can make your choice whether you want to be more AoE focused or more single target focused. It's another one of those specs that has a high crit DR. And for our implants, we use Fearless Victor and Berserker Skull. If we do use Second Wind, we use it over Berserkers. And then our stats are pretty much generic, the same thing as AP. This critical DR cannot be reached reasonably unless you give up accuracy, which I don't like giving up accuracy ever on a spec that is semi-reliant on accuracy. We should be going into, I think I put Carnage next. All right, yep. So this is the one that I have to explain a little bit more than the other ones. The critical DR is pretty high, probably the highest out of all. And it's using a critical relic only if you're sub 3600 critical, which I do recommend using a critical relic, because if you want to go the build that I go, which is 1.3 GCD, you will be under 3600 critical. So basically what's going on here is that I'm running 5% accuracy, 2 augments, accuracy stem, and 1 enhancement that's accuracy. Then I'm running 7 alacrity enhancements, 1 alacrity augment, and the rest of my augments go to critical. Always use Fearless Victor and Dispatcher. If I ever use Second Wind, I get rid of Fearless. And what I mean by enhancement is also interchangeable with implant stats in earpiece. I am including the earpiece and implants as enhancements, if that makes sense. Then going into Annihilation, you pretty much only have Spiteful Saber that's worth using. There are other ones that you can use, but Spiteful Saber overall increases your sustain tenfold. Critical DR 4,850, so too bad for 4,850. And only if you're sub 3,000 should use the critical relic. We're running Fearless Victor, Berserker's Call. Sometimes you can use Dispatcher if you want to, and you can also use Second Wind besides just Dispatcher. You would pick to take out Berserkers in those cases. Then we're pretty much running the generic stat loadout because it's the easiest way to get as close as to your critical DR, but also still have meaningful stats everywhere where it's semi-min-maxed. Going into Rage Juggernaut, we have Cauterized and Enraged Crash, just like Fury. It's either single target or AoE. One more thing about Rage specifically, when you have Cauterized, it actually helps reduce the cooldown of your Rage, because when you do a crit dot with Cauterized, it also contributes to your critical hits for the Enraged cooldown reduction. So that is one thing to think about. I like Cauterized with that, especially if you're taking the CDR on Obliterate. Allows you to use Enrage a lot more often, and it allows you to be a lot more mobile. It feels pretty good. In my recent Focus Guardian video, I actually ran that. It felt pretty nice, and you can see how mobile I am in that video. And for Vengeance, Cut to Pieces, there is, I think it's Hemorrhage for the other tactical. I don't really recommend that one because Cut to Pieces impact, even on single target, is pretty good. And even if you only get to 2 to 3 players in your cleave, it's still going to pull ahead, and it feels just generally really good. And with the way that you should, I guess, nowadays play Vengeance, it's really nice to constantly get that healing. And the more dots that you have up, and the more times that you refresh your dots, you get your dot criticals, you can get your rage up more, rage up. And rage being up more means more healing, and so on and so forth. It kind of like spirals. It feels really good. Implants that use Champion's Precision and Second Wind, you're not really doing like a ton of single target damage, so you don't really need Fearless Victor. But if you are, Fearless Victor is pretty nice. Second Wind just synergizes really well with Juggernaut. Going into Lightning, we use Element of Convection, Stormwatch, and Errant's Haste. Or, that's how you pronounce it. Only use Element of Convection if you're running Volt Rush. If you're not running Volt Rush, Stormwatch. The critical DR for this spec is really low. So this does allow you to go for more alacrity. You could try to stay even lower alacrity, but ultimately you're going to go over on one of the stats here, so you might as well just make use of it. Go higher alacrity and call it a day, so you can get more roots out, and inevitably probably get more damage out. Since we don't need accuracy, we're able to make use of the stats a little bit better. And also for Lightning, it is 3209 for the 1.3 GCD. And then for Madness, we have Tempest Row, Killing Field, Mystic, Ruthless Blade. Mystics is good for like single target dueling kind of like playstyle. Killing Field is pretty much just pure AoE. And Tempest Row is just a balanced in between. And also is really good for eternal damage. So if there's a lot of tanky targets, Tempest Row will usually always pull ahead. Killing Field can definitely do some crazy AoE, but my personal opinion, if you want to do AoE, Tempest Row with AoE Lightning Strike, it's very good, and it also triggers internal damage to everyone, so regardless of whether they're a tank or not, you still shred them. And pretty much everything else is pretty straightforward and simple here, so thankfully to really confuse you. If you guys have any questions, again, feel free to leave them in the comments. Then we go into Arsenal, Burning Bright, Product Extension. One's a burst one, and the other one's sustain. You choose which one you want to run. The critical DR is a little bit higher than normal, but it's fine. We will be slightly over the critical requirement, or it's not requirement, but we'll be slightly over the critical relic threshold. So we won't actually run the critical relic. We want to go 10% accuracy because a lot of our damage is tied to accuracy, and the damage gain of landing our abilities versus missing them is much greater than just running more critical. And then we also only run 2 alacrity enhancements, and that's it. That's enough to hit, I believe it's 1123 for the 1.4 GCD. Then going into Innovative Ordnance. We pretty much only use energized charges because it's just that good. The dot does like 15 to 16k crits, which is incredible. It also hits very hard through .dr specs, so it does give you an option to better deal with those classes that are relatively tanky towards you. So whenever you have your supercharged gas up, lethality, pyro, doesn't matter, you can still shred them. Pretty much uses the generic setup, and there's nothing too special about it. If you do give up overcharge cell for second wind or stimulated, do remember that you want to be a little bit more mindful about your heat management because overcharge cell and supercharged gas is very vital for IO. Then going to engineering, you can run either Ionic Discharge, which is super burst ability pretty much, or Ruthless Interrogation. I like Ionic because PvP is all about bursting. Ruthless Interrogation, though, haven't really gotten to play it. It seems like it would be a nice one, but in my experience, people don't survive for more than one loop for engineering. That's pretty bad. I'm pretty sure even if I didn't run Ionic, I still feel like they would survive, so I feel like Ruthless Interrogation would get as much value. Ionic Discharge is just generally nice because it allows you to have a burst pretty much all the time. Every single time I'm supposed to charge is up, regardless of whether you have auto crit for it or not, it's going to hit hard. You have a lot of choices for your implants. Personally, I like lock and loaded and stimulated, and then sometimes I'll take second wind over stimulated. And then the other two are PvE options that do help you play more of like a PvE style. They're not bad. Going into Virulence, we have Ultraviolet Blast, which is burst one, and the other one is an AoE one. Again, you can choose whichever you would like to do. This one's a little bit different because the critical DR is so low. This means that you can put a lot more stats into Mastery. Other than that, Virulence is very, very straightforward. It's also very fun to play right now if you haven't played it yet. Going into the last one, which is Marksman. We run Agitating Energies, Refraction Point, or the Roll Ambush. Personally, I don't like the Roll Ambush because I don't like giving up my roll for damage. Refraction Point is really funny and just absolutely obnoxious. You can really team control people very easily with it. There's also a lot of free AoE. And Agitating Energies is usually the default one to go if you're looking for damage and kill potential. The reason why I say that is because the dot refreshing every single time that you use penetrating rounds, and it's called, it absolutely melts people. You can apply it to the tank and then the person that's guarded, and then you can hit into guard with penetrating rounds, and it'll refresh the dot both targets. This is not the only dot that works this way, but I think most of them got fixed. Premonition was an example. But other than that, hope you guys learned something. If you guys have any comments or anything like that, or any questions, feel free to hit the description, or not the description, comment section. I'll be more than happy to help you.